Chapter 5: The Moral Worlds We Inhabit. Imagine two people witnessing the same event. A student challenges a teacher. A protest disrupts a public gathering. A company lays off employees. A parent disciplines a child. A government expands its authority during a crisis. The facts may be largely uncontested, yet the emotional reactions can differ dramatically. One person sees courage, another sees disrespect. One sees justice, another sees disorder. One sees compassion, another sees irresponsibility. The disagreement often appears immediate, almost instinctive, as though the conclusion arrived before the reasoning began. In many cases, that may be exactly what happened. Most of us like to imagine ourselves as rational creatures. We observe the facts, we analyze the evidence, we weigh competing arguments, and then we arrive at a conclusion. Certainly, human beings are capable of reasoning. Yet a growing body of research suggests that the story is often more complicated. Reason frequently appears less like the engine of judgment and more like its interpreter. The feeling comes first, the explanation follows. The social psychologist Jonathan Haidt offered a memorable metaphor for this process. He described the mind as a rider sitting atop an elephant. The rider represents conscious reasoning. The elephant represents intuition. At first glance, the rider appears in control, yet anyone who has ever encountered an elephant can appreciate the imbalance. The rider can suggest, the rider can guide, but when the elephant decides to move, the rider often follows. Much of human judgment appears to work in a similar way. Intuitions arrive quickly. Reasoning arrives later, often explaining conclusions that intuition has already reached. This observation can feel unsettling. It challenges the image many people hold of themselves as primarily rational decision-makers. Yet it also explains many familiar experiences. Have you ever found yourself immediately liking someone without being entirely sure why? Or distrusting someone before you could articulate a reason? Have you ever felt that a situation was unfair, noble, disgusting, admirable, or wrong before you could explain your reaction? Human beings often experience moral judgments as perceptions rather than conclusions. The feeling arrives first. The reasoning catches up afterward. This does not mean reasoning is unimportant. Far from it. Reasoning helps us evaluate intuitions, question assumptions, consider consequences, learn from mistakes, expand understanding. The rider matters. But Haidt's insight suggests that reasoning often operates within a landscape already shaped by intuition. The rider may steer, but the elephant supplies much of the momentum. This becomes especially important when we consider moral disagreement. In the previous chapter, we explored how people interpret reality through different lenses. Now we encounter another layer. People do not merely interpret differently, they often feel differently. The same event can trigger entirely different moral intuitions, and once those intuitions arise, reasoning often begins from different starting points. For much of modern history, many thinkers assumed that morality revolved primarily around questions of harm and fairness. Certainly these concerns matter. Most people care deeply about suffering. Most people care deeply about justice. Yet Haidt's research suggested that human moral life may be broader than many people realize. Different individuals and cultures appear to draw upon several recurring moral foundations: care and harm, fairness and cheating, loyalty and betrayal, authority and subversion, sanctity and degradation, liberty and oppression. These foundations function somewhat like moral taste buds. Different people possess all of them to varying degrees, yet individuals, communities, and cultures often emphasize them differently. This helps explain why certain disagreements feel so difficult to resolve. People may believe they are arguing about facts when they are actually responding to different moral concerns. One person sees a question of fairness. Another sees a question of loyalty. One sees a question of liberty. Another sees a question of authority. One sees harm. Another sees sanctity. Each may be responding sincerely. Each may be perceiving something real. Yet they are reacting to different aspects of the same situation. Consider a family. One child values independence above all else. Another values loyalty. A third values fairness. The same event may appear entirely different to each of them. The disagreement is not necessarily about intelligence, nor is it necessarily about information. The disagreement may arise because different moral intuitions have been activated. This insight introduces an important form of humility. When people disagree morally, the temptation is to assume that one side cares and the other side does not. One side values justice and the other does not. One side values compassion and the other does not. Often the reality is more complicated. People may care deeply. They may simply care about different dimensions of the situation. What appears to one person as indifference may sometimes be attention directed elsewhere. None of this implies that all moral judgments are equally valid, nor does it imply that moral conflicts can always be reconciled. Civilization contains genuine disagreements, trade-offs, conflicts of value, competing goods. The existence of moral foundations does not eliminate those tensions. It helps explain why they arise. The more closely we examine moral life, the more it begins to resemble a landscape rather than a single path. Human beings navigate questions of care, justice, loyalty, authority, liberty, meaning, purity, responsibility, belonging. Different people place different weights on different concerns, and those differences shape how the world appears to them. A pattern should now be becoming visible. In Chapter 4, we discovered that people interpret reality through different lenses. In this chapter, we discover that people also experience reality through different moral intuitions. The result is that disagreement often emerges long before formal reasoning begins. People are not merely arguing from different conclusions. They are often starting from different emotional and moral foundations. This realization can change the way we listen. Instead of immediately asking, "Why does this person believe that?" we might begin asking, "What concern are they responding to? What value are they protecting? What moral intuition is shaping their perception?" Those questions do not guarantee agreement, but they often produce understanding. And understanding is frequently the beginning of wisdom. Closing orientation. Human beings are not purely rational creatures, nor are they purely emotional creatures. We are something more complicated. We reason, we feel, we interpret, we judge, and these processes continually influence one another. Much of what we call moral reasoning begins within intuitions that arrive before conscious analysis. The rider matters, but so does the elephant. To understand civilization, we must understand both, because civilizations are built not only from ideas, but from moral worlds. If people interpret reality through different lenses and experience it through different moral intuitions, another question naturally emerges. Why do recurring patterns of disagreement appear again and again across centuries? Why do certain arguments seem almost timeless? Why do intelligent people repeatedly divide over the same fundamental questions about society, progress, equality, authority, and human nature? To answer those questions, we must descend one layer deeper and explore the assumptions that sit beneath many of our moral and political disagreements, the visions through which people understand the possibilities and limits of human life.